Barry Alexander Brown is a known author, director, and editor for many different film productions. Now, based on the true story, Son of the South, he's actually the director. Mm-hmm. How come?
How come I'm the director?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's a project I really wanted to do. It's a very personal project. It's about this guy, Bob Zellner, who grew up in Alabama. His grandfather was in the Ku Klux Klan. And it's a story about his transition from being completely outside of the civil rights movement at that time in 1961 to being pulled into the very center of it. And I'm from Alabama too. Okay. And the story, a lot of the story is set in Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. Mm-hmm. So I always wanted to do a film about the civil rights movement, something in the civil rights movement, something I could do. And so I felt that the story of Bob Zellner was something I could really bring to life. Mm-hmm. And because I'm from there, I felt that I could also bring something to this movie as the director that very, very few other people could do. And
can you tell us what it is?
Well, you know, for one thing, a lot of times, if you're a Southerner, you see movies about the South, a lot of times they don't feel like it's the South. It just doesn't feel like the South. When you're from anywhere and somebody comes from outside and who hasn't really done the work to understand the place, the accents are usually off, right? You know, and the people the personalities are off. You know, the South is a very, very funny place. It's funny. Sometimes it's inadvertently funny, but sometimes people are funny on purpose. A lot of times people are funny on purpose. And you see so many movies about the South made by people who are not Southerners, and they're just dire. The people are humorless. They're oftentimes, just there's no sense of humor. And you see my movie, there's all kinds of sense of humor. I mean, there's a point in this story where they're taking Bob out to hang him. And that scene in the car is a funny scene. It's a funny scene. And I don't think
perspective, right?
Huh?
A different perspective.
Well, I think that if you don't really understand the place well enough, you don't understand that could happen. You know, and what was great about Lucas is a Southerner too. You know, and Lucas understood. I mean, without talking about it, he understood the sense of humor, and he would bring things into scenes that would actually make me laugh on the set. And at one point, a scene between him and Shamir Anderson. And Shamir is here in Berlin shooting a movie, John Wick 4. As a matter of fact, he's living right up the street right now. And so there was a scene between Shamir and Lucas, and which at the end of it they said, you know, you can't laugh during the take, man. You just can't laugh. I said, no, I'm sorry. That was hilarious.
So actually Lucas was the perfect fit for the role. When you saw him, you would just, was it like love on the first sight? Or
well, I wanted Lucas very early on, and yet we went to a number of other actors before coming back to Lucas. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, I mean, listen, I'm grateful, I'm lucky that it was Lucas who did this movie, because not only does he simply understand it because he's from there, is that, you know, physically he looks like Bob Zellner. He looks like the real guy. Mm-hmm. You know?
Have you met Bob Zellner?
I've known Bob for the last 35 years.
Wow. We've
been friends for the last 35 years. You know, and when we first started meeting, and when we first met in New York, actually, he would tell me stories about the civil rights movement, and they were always jaw-dropping stories, just jaw-dropping. I mean, it's so many stories.
So you actually could feel the movie, like you were the perfect director for this.
I think I was the only director for it.
Oh, the only one.
Yeah,
the only one, no one else.
I think nobody else.
You found yourself.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And Spike Lee, he was the executive producer.
Yeah. I first told Spike when I was writing the script about 11 or 12 years ago, and he said, "Oh no, man! What are you're writing the Great White Hope, the Savior movie?" You know? I said, "No, Spike, it isn't. You know, it's about a guy who's actually saved by the Civil Rights Movement." And I said, "All right, I got to see this." So I showed Spike the script, and he saw right away, yeah, this is not a savior movie. This is not a movie about a white guy who comes in and saves all the black people in the Civil Rights Movement. That's not what this is about. This is about a guy who, for all the right reasons, makes the right choices. Yeah. You know, and in any movement, you need this. If you have a movement like the Civil Rights Movement, you have to be much broader than just African Americans. Yeah. If you're going to succeed, what you really want is to change the hearts and minds of people. You do. And this is the story of somebody whose heart and his mind and his soul was changed.
What do you think is the difference between back then, 1961, and now 2021?
Well, actually, you know what I think is the difference is I think that there's more possibilities of things that can happen now. I think we've actually have come a long way. People say we haven't come very far. You don't understand that we've come far. You know, there's further to go. But we've come far. You know, in the South that I grew up in, black people had no rights. When I say no rights, I mean no rights. You know, white people weren't going to jail for killing somebody who was black. That wasn't happening. So basically, they didn't even have the right to life. They didn't have the right to vote. They could not vote in the South I grew up in. And almost none of the black people I saw growing up had a decent job. They were kept outside of the economy. Well, they weren't. I mean, they had jobs. But they were always low-level jobs, you know? And, you know, these are people that were not allowed, you know, a decent education. They weren't allowed to participate in society, you know? As going back to 1955, 1956, when Rosa Parks refused to get up from her seat. I mean, at that point, you know, they couldn't only ride on a certain part of the bus. You know, I mean, that was a symbol of many, many other things that had to change.
I can tell that you very much deep into this whole story, you want to tell something out there, right? Do you want to tell the people something, what you experience, what you can actually, maybe people can change out there. Yep. And from your perspective, and also put that in a film, it's just the...
But I want to take you back to 1961, to Montgomery, Alabama in 1961. I want to take you back there.
Right.
And be a real place in which the heroes of the story are real people. They're not angels, they're not saints, okay? Yeah. And the villains are real people. They're not horrible across the board. You know, they're real people. I mean, you have a character like Doc, who's based on a real person. You know, this was a real person. This bike that Bob knew in 1961. All these things that happened in the movie happened in real life. They were on the boxing team together at college. Doc was in that crowd that tried to hang him in 1961. You know? And yet Doc had been a medic in the Korean War, right? And he'd saved black people from the battlefield. So he would save people that he wouldn't talk to back in the Deep South. Maybe people that he would even do harm to back in the Deep South. But on the battlefield, he might save their lives. It is these huge contradictions, you know? And you could look at a guy like Doc, well, you know, maybe in many ways Doc could have been a great husband, a great family man, a great father, a good friend. But when it came to race, he was a monster, you know? I mean, there was people in my family like that, people I loved, who were monsters when it came to race, but people who were great in many, many other ways. So I want to do a movie in which everybody's really a person.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. I'm like impressed. I could listen to you the whole day. I could keep going with you if you would have more time. It would be wonderful.
Sure.
I would like to know, though, if you have another new project coming up that you also have your heart with it and you.
Yeah. Well, there is a over the last year, Spike Lee and I have been making an 8-hour series on 9/11 and the pandemic set in New York City. Okay. That is airing right now in America. Yeah. The first 2 hours aired on Sunday, the next Sunday, and after then the final on 9/11. And for me, I've written a script, a dark fantasy, set in Malta.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the main characters, I've written to be German. I want to cast a German actress.
Interesting.
Interesting. More and more interesting.
It's getting more and more interesting. I'm going to stay here the whole day with you.
You know, and yeah. It's a dark fantasy, and nothing like I've ever done before. And you know,
Can you tell a bit about what kind of dark fantasy it is, or do you not want to say too much?
It's called The Provider. Mm-hmm. It starts 300 years before, and the main character is somebody who has been able to stay alive and maintain his youth and his health, and as a matter of fact, the whole prosperity of this town and this region over the last 300 years.
Okay. We're gonna talk more about that project. Yeah. This was a wonderful conversation, and I wish you a lot of luck for the future, for all your other projects that come up, and
Thanks.
Have fun in Berlin.
I love Berlin.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.